What comes to mind for you when you hear the words once upon a time? For me, I feel a bit of nostalgia and anticipation that a really good story is coming. It evokes memories of being transported to faraway, magical lands where heroes and villains exist, where there are fairy godmothers, maybe glass slippers and pumpkins. You know what I mean. There's something so powerful about the way that a good story can transport us and ignite our imagination, maybe even filling us with a sense of wonder and hope. A good storyteller has the power to create a really enriching experience for their listeners. The truth is, though, that we are all storytellers, each and every one of us, whether we realize it or not. We're constantly telling ourselves stories about who we are, labeling the experiences that we go through, the interactions we have with others, our challenges, our achievements. And sometimes the way that we tell the stories about the things that are happening in our lives or about ourselves can be really helpful and useful to us and propel us forward. Other times, however, they can really be pretty disempowering and keep us stuck in a negative feedback loop. Narrative therapy is a really useful approach to becoming aware of the stories that we hold and that we have accepted as true, and reflecting on what happens to us or for us when we believe that story. It helps us play with rescripting these stories or finding a different version that might be more useful or more helpful for our present day selves. We're so used to thinking of our perceptions as objective reality, but so many of our beliefs about ourselves and the world are based on the meaning that we assign to it. I'm sure it has happened to you that you have been to an event or gone through something with a colleague or a friend, a family member. You both observe or participate in the same exact thing, and you walk out having totally different experiences. Who's right? Is the dancer on the New York City subway a nuisance getting in the way of you reading your book peacefully? Or is it a magical New York City moment that's adding excitement to an otherwise dull ride? That example is pretty personal since I live in the city and have definitely told myself both of those stories and others about the performers that come on board. Take, for example, a child with a wild imagination who, because they're so busy in their mind, thinking of new ideas and crafting stories, might be bumping into things a lot, forgetful, they might struggle with organization. Now, one parent might look at this child and say, "You're so spacey and all over the place. You're really going to have a challenging time functioning as an adult in the real world." Another parent might look at the same child and say, "Wow, I love watching the wheels turning in your brain. I can't wait to see what you are going to create with that mind of yours." Which parent's right? Neither? Both? Each parent is taking in certain objective behaviors and then making meaning of it as it relates to the present and to the future of their child. And if the child hears either message enough, they will likely adopt it as their own. And that can really influence their trajectory in life, right? A child who carries their imagination as a blessing versus a burden. I know which one I'd rather be. Let's experiment with this, because we all have these types of stories about ourselves, whether they might have been created or reinforced by our parents, our siblings, friends, strangers, teachers. It really could be anyone. Some of these personal narratives of ours might be ones that we want to hang on to and strengthen because they might be really useful to us. Others, though, might be ready to say goodbye and be evolved into a newer, more helpful version. So let's see. I invite you to think of a personal quality of yours that you have come to think of as negative, or others have told you is negative. Maybe it's that you're too quiet, or that you're too loud, you're always late, you're too perfectionistic. The list goes on. As you settle on one, you might recall stories from childhood or more recently where this trait was really put on display, and it got reinforced for you that it's pretty negative. When you have the trait and you have a story or two, I invite you to grab a piece of paper and a pen and jot this down. Write about this trait, why it's negative, how you know that it's negative, and jotting down the stories that confirm it as such. When you're done, you have two options. The first is to find the exception to the rule. So, finding an example of a time where you displayed the opposite trait of that negative quality. So if you're the one who is considered to be super quiet, maybe finding an example, however small, of a time where you weren't that quiet, where you were either loud or just like everyone else. And write about that in great detail. Write about what helped you exercise the opposite trait, how you can see yourself doing it again in the future, what conditions might support that for you. Another option, you can choose to turn around the negativity of this trait and write all the ways that it's actually pretty positive and it might serve you or others. I know this might be challenging, but stretch yourself. When you're done, read over both narratives, the original negative story and your second rescripted version. So either the exception to the rule or the turnaround, finding the positive in it. And notice your internal reaction and response as you read each one. Which one feels more true? You might feel a lot more comfortable to read the first in some way because it might just be more familiar. That's super normal. But I'd like you to consider, as you read your second, what if this weren't true? What if I choose to see it this way? What might that create for me in my life? You can take this technique on the road with you, noticing when you're replaying an old narrative and you're caught in a loop. Take a pause, take a breath, and tell yourself a different story.